Hi guys, this is Enno from the Xzistor lab, and we are back with Troopy, our little Lego robot. And in this video we will see how the Xzistor concept brain model can generate anger and aggression in the mind of a robot. And we will also look at a future where robots will have no anger or aggression. We will firstly look at the experimental installation or agitator we have built to demonstrate how Troopy experiences anger and aggression. Then we will look at what happens in the brain model when Troopy feels anger. We will also look at the history of aggression, why it was designed into the brain in the first place, and how it affects survival. Finally, we will look at anger in the biological brain and discuss the question, what will happen if we physically remove the aggression function from the human or robot brain? Let's start by looking at the experimental rig we have added to Troopy's confine to demonstrate anger. I want to show the agitator that I've designed for Troopy, and it's basically suspended just on two lines from a post at the top, and there you can see the assembly where the umbilical feeds down to Troopy. So he gets his power through the umbilical, and he feeds his video back through the umbilical, and that comes down to the computer. So basically a pillar suspended from that is this sort of aluminium beam with the what I call just the agitator. And interestingly, this white color was eventually the one I chose because I first had sort of that skin kind of pink color, which I used for Troopy, but then he started following my hand, and it became quite irritating because every time I wanted to work or do something, he would get angry at my hand, chase my hand, and eventually actually injured himself by breaking his head-up display panel on the side of the confine. So in the end I decided I haven't used white yet in his sort of color scheme for his surround, and that's how I decided on using the white. If you look carefully, you'll see that I've got the Velcro straps there at the back. That's so that I can adjust the size of the sort of agitator. And the purpose of that is just to see if I make it less and less prominent in his field of view, to what extent he still sort of gets aggressive, and to what extent it'll dominate his thoughts and his emotions. So that's just the physical sort of rig that one can use, and the way it was designed is just to make sure that it protrudes into the confine, but when Troopy attacks it or fights with it, his own umbilical and his antennas won't get tangled in the agitator. Now watch Troopy fight with his agitator in his learning confine. When we look at the computer where the Xzistor concept brain model is running, we can clearly see what Troopy is seeing on the video screen. So we can see the agitator moving from side to side, clearly see the white object. And when it enters Troopy's sort of the center of field of view, we see the facial expression changes. There we see as he recognizes the agitator, how his mood suddenly changes, and he gets to feel anger and aggression. And if we look to the right hand side here, we can see the yellow curve. Ignore the other lines, but the yellow curve is an indication or derivative state of the anger aggression state that's being generated. And when the agitator is in the middle of the field of view, it shoots up like this, and when it moves out of view, he fails to recognize it and it comes down. And if we look down here at the general happiness curve, we see synchronized to that when the agitator disappears from view, he actually feels relief and he feels a little bit better for a moment. There we see the slight improvement in his mood, but then very quickly he drops down below the yellow curve again when he's angry. So it's an unpleasant state that he's experiencing when he's in anger. At the moment I'm holding him back. He wants to actually attack the agitator, but I've got his wheels locked, just for us to look at this state. If we look at the left here at the top curve, we also see this clearly. The moment he enters the center, this appears over here on the left hand side, indicating that it's a real sort of visceral state, and it's not something that comes from the mind or just from thinking. So very, very strong anger state being generated. And what we'll do now is we will actually release Troopy and let him attack the agitator, and we see how that looks. With the agitator stabilized in the sort of middle of Troopy's field of view, he's now ready to attack it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to now hand over control to him and stop locking his wheels. So let's see what happens when we give him his freedom. So immediately he's moving forward, approaching the agitator. There goes the right arm up, and he attacks it and gives it a bash with a right hand. Interesting, interesting there we saw the huge relief that he experienced, and I'm just going to go back and freeze frame on that relief that we saw there, because that's an important point we want to make in this video. So we'll just go for a minute and look at the anatomy of that curve. Let's take a look at the graphs on the dashboard. The moment Troopy has walked away from the agitator, and when we look at the right hand corner, we see the graph there, the yellow graph. We see the level of aggression coming down quite steeply, and it's interesting, if we come over to the left hand side, we see that associated with this reduction or release of anger is actually associated a very high sense of release or relief, measured by the standards of this model. This is almost a very pleasurable scenario, bordering on euphoria. So it's a very high level of subjective state, emotional state, and like I said, bordering on euphoria. And also, if we look at the facial expression, we see it's there's a big smile on Troopy's face there, so highly pleasurable. If we come here to the bottom, to the right hand graph, we also see that it's not that clear, but we see the moment the robot moves away after the altercation, is in a very high state of pleasure, coming down only when he moves away, and we see the blue curve there dropping down, coming back to normal. So a very, very high state of pleasure and release derived from this. And I think what is important is this is a phenomenon that gives rise to the whole artifact of sport and competition in our existence. So we seek to obtain something of this euphoria, and we would be happy just to observe an altercation or a fight. You see people flocking to stadiums to watch people box or fight or wrestle, and that's all in pursuit of just a little bit of this sort of euphoria of the battle and the triumph in battle. And I think if we look at the history of the human on Earth, and we look at the vicious and brutal battles that have taken place over time, it's well worth asking the question: why is this algorithm even part of the brain? And I think we'll now look a little bit at the history of this algorithm and the role it plays in survival. To understand how aggression works in the mind, we have to go back right to the beginning of human life. And it's interesting when you look at the planet Earth drifting through space. It looks beautiful and tranquil, but it's in fact a blood-soaked battlefield. And one can ask, where did all the conflict start? And it started right here in the brain. So from the earliest times, we see that humans have shown very aggressive behavior. From the earliest times, they were embroiled in conflicts, in bloody conflicts, and developed weapons to fight each other. And this carried on for hundreds of years. It carried on for thousands of years. And man kept on being drawn to war, and kept on developing new weapons. And one would think that they would come to their senses at some stage, but in this phase, I think it was somewhere 1300s to 1400s, where they had a 100-year war, which was in fact 116 years between the England and France, and it just got insane how the 5 generations of English people and French were born and died knowing only one thing, and that is war in their lives. So it really got extreme. It led into World War I, with all the misery and mayhem caused by that. That did not bring man to his senses. We saw what he did, but we did not learn enough from that, so it went into World War II, and the imponderable suffering once again caused by that was just immense. And of course, because of man's lust for war and his ability to innovate, really got to the point where it got out of hand. And it's just amazing to what length the naked ape, that is the human, will go in terms of warfare and winning at conflict. And it eventually led to the design of the atom bomb and the use of the atom bomb. And there was a point in history that we were able, with all the nuclear weapons on Earth, we were able to decimate life on Earth something like 12 times. And it really got to the point where one would think, have we seen enough? Can we rationalize, that what's been happening, or should we intervene? And there was a point when we got to the United Nations organization was created, and one would think that would have brought some rules and an end to the madness. But the question is, will man ever conquer his urge to fight? Will he ever, will the madness stop? If we look today, what the situation is today, we see that the weapons are just getting more sophisticated and menacing. Internationally, global players are just developing weapons at an alarming rate, and it is one of the biggest industries in the world. And even if we were to suppress the aggression by societal rules, we do see that they still manifest in some way or other. And here we see just what's supposed to be an innocent football game. You still have to ask yourself the question: is this about the fine game of football, or is there something more menacing about the behaviour of these fans? And here we see a slogan or a banner up which says, "Red or Dead," with a person showing he's beheaded somebody, and you just think, how is this relevant to the fine game of football? Where does these behaviours come from? And also, if you look at aggressive behaviours just on a daily basis, people having shouting matches and road rage and territorial battles, it really carries on in spite of all the rules of society, and it's still there, very much in the brain. if we look at this simple little video, it does explain a lot, and it's going to help me to make a few points important to how aggression works in the mind, and also why it is forms part of the brain. So just take a look at these locusts, and we'll discuss it as we go along. They are fighting for the attention of a female, and there you can see them really getting into a serious battle with each other, comparing forces. It will be a case of probably the strongest one will gain the attention of the female, and really a vicious battle going on there for attention. There is the one male is now mating with a female. He has now won the battle, but already on the right hand side another male is ready to attack him, fight him off the female, and we will soon see that the stronger male that has now won the battle will now move into mate with a female. And in this, I think we can learn a lot. So we see that the aggression algorithm drives the fighting instinct in insects. It works exactly the same for humans, so it's exactly the same type of algorithm located in the reptilian brain. And in the human, this can be overridden by learning and reasoning, which the insects, of course, can't do. And if you look at the picture of the brain there, we see the reptilian brain, where most of this takes place, is down towards the bottom end of the brain, towards the brain stem, a very primitive part of the brain. So what exactly is the purpose of this aggression algorithm? Fighting actually performs a very important quality assurance function, and it basically ensures all important physical and cognitive abilities in males are tested to select the best genetic material for procreation. So if we just consider the locusts again, the way they were fighting, immediately their physical abilities would be put to the test. So the strength, the coordination, the physical structures, the genetics would be put to the test. Also the cognitive abilities. So is the locust able to see properly? Is it able to smell properly? And finally the behavioral aspects. So if the locust is not inclined to be interested in females, we saw a few of these locusts standing around the female, not fighting or not partaking. Their genes will obviously not be part of the next generation because they didn't partake in the mating. So those key aspects gets tested during fighting, and it ensures that the right genetic material moves forward for procreation. Let's just take a look at the role of aggression in a typical ecosystem. And we have to go far back to a planet. And if we just consider that the planet will have a finite size, and it will have finite resources, so finite amounts of water, finite amounts of food. And if the environmental conditions on the planet might change, you suddenly find that the life forms will have to adapt to survive to the new environmental conditions. And old life forms will need to be replaced by new, optimized, better adapted life forms, specifically due to the limited resources on the planet. And that's effectively why the older life forms need to die off, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. So mating using the male and a female, we could set up this genetic transaction, and this will allow improved quality of the adapted life forms. So when the males fight for a mate, that'll ensure optimized physical, mental, and behavioral features, and these will then be conveyed to the offspring. At the same time, we often find that females would select mates, the males, based on some physical and behavioral traits important for survival. So sometimes we will see a spider do a very specific dance and show some colors, or the females would look at the tail feathers of a bird to decide, which is the preferred mate. Interestingly, hyenas, for instance, the female will start to run and just keep on running, and the males will chase after her. And only the males that are really well adapted and fit and in a good condition to run and chase, keep on chasing the female, will eventually get the chance to mate with the female. And that way, that very specific physical trait is tested and ensured in the offspring of that female. But aggression is not just about mating. It's not just a fight to get into the mating cycle. Humans and animals also use this algorithm for fighting for protection. So, they will also use it to obtain food, to fight off rivals and enemies, to get food, water, any desirable object, really. They will fight for land and for power. So humans often fight for power, which, if you think about it carefully, simply means a guaranteed supply of sources providing pleasure, safety, security, cultural identity, sovereignty, basically independence. Part of that power would be status. Part of it would be the demise of rivals. These are also reasons why humans typically would fight. And also the algorithm also drives individuals to mob violence, where the insecure individual seeks protection from a crowd or a gang, like we've seen at the football stadiums, the slides of the football stadiums. If the human brain was like the animal brain, interestingly, so aggression would have been limited to fist fights. But because the human brain can learn, think and innovate, it keeps on developing weapons, and it keeps on developing new weapons. And if you think about it, it is the human innovation algorithm that has come all the way from the hand axe. It's generated gunpowder. It came up with cruise missiles. It came up with an atom bomb. So it's all comes from this innovation algorithm. And the key question now, of course, is: will the robots of the future be aggressive? Will they innovate more sophisticated weapons, and will they destroy human life? And for that, I want to introduce two what I would call neuro-architectural considerations, and basically look at two design routes. And the one is very benign, and the other one is the one that would be concerned about. So if you look at design route 1, if the environment stays the same, so that's the environment in which the robot or the robot colony will live or exist. If it stays the same, there's no need to change the robot in order for it to survive. So aggression in aid of natural selection can be removed completely. There need to be no aggression, because there's no fighting for a mate or any of that quality assurance testing required. So no adaptation or mating is required. When we look at design route 2, now this is where the robot's environment is going to change. Now suddenly adaptation is required for survival. So as the environment changes, the robot needs to change as well to adapt to this new environment. And what is needed is a new, better adapted robot to replace the old robots. So how do we get robots that are better adapted to the changed environment and that will survive? So let's take just a closer look at this design route 2, where we have a changed environment. So if the energy sources, the food, is limited, old robots also need to die and be recycled back into food. And that's typically why you and I have to die, because we literally have to be recycled back into the food chain to feed the newer, better adapted robots to ensure survival. And in that process, we might choose to use the male-female model with mating as a quality assurance step towards new, better adapted design. It works in nature like that, works with animals, works with humans, works pretty well. We've been here for a couple of thousands, if not millions, if not billions of years. And this will include assessment to secure the best cognitive and physical traits through competition or fighting for mating privileges. But the moment you have that requirement for adaptation, it becomes sense to have different sexes, to have the mating process, and to have the fighting that goes with the mating process, to choose the best physical traits and the best cognitive traits. In the innovation algorithm forms part of the robot brain, along with the aggression fighting algorithm. Robots will develop new weapons and could choose to destroy humans if no benefit to robots. And just for completeness sake, the fact that if we remove the aggression algorithm from a robot, it does not necessarily mean that the robot will not destroy the human. Although the robot will be charged with an emotion when it has the aggression algorithm, it could still, in sort of cold consideration, also destroy a human if it is not taught some morals or some ethical values within a community where killing humans is sort of not allowed. So one must just not think that it's only the aggression algorithm that would drive a robot to destroy humans. It could also be just sort of the logical part of the brain that decides that there's no benefit here, or there might even be some perceived threat from humans. Let's do a little simple design project. I want to add some of these into these videos just to show where the Xzistor concept brain model can take you, and how you can think out of the box, and why we sometimes say that it allows us to see 1,000 years into the future. So here's a simple project. Let's say we have a planet X, let's call it planet X, and we want some robots to autonomously and independently survive on planet X. And we have a changing environment. So let's say on planet X we have 6 months per year we have dry weather, 6 months per year we have flooding up to a depth of 30 centimeters. And on our planet X we have 3 types of robots. So we have a queen robot, which is simply just a robot that does 3D printing, and it prints new robots. Then there's a princess robot. The princess robot choose design from worker robots and provide this to the queen. So the princess will receive genetic material from the worker robot and then provide that to the queen for reproduction. And then there's the worker robot, which compete and fight to get its own design blueprint to the princess robots. So the worker robot can float and has 4 wheels and 4 propellers. So a robot will have a fixed wheel speed between 1 and 10 RPM. So any given worker robot will be born or will be generated with a fixed speed of either somewhere between 1 and 10 RPM, and that won't change. Similarly, it will have a fixed propeller speed between 50 and 500 RPM, which it is assigned at birth, and that doesn't change. So worker robots also have a long extender arm, and I'm going to put up a graphic of these robots soon. So they have a long extender arm with their design blueprint on an open SD card on the tip, and I'll show that in the graphic. When they reach the princess robots, they have to reach high up with the extender arm to insert the SD card in a slot for data transfer, because the princess robots are moving on stilts above 30 centimeters high. So the worker robots can push rival worker robots away when pursuing the princess robots using the extender arms, and they'll put up a bit of a fight with the extender arms, trying to fight each other off. And obviously it'll depend on which robot has got making the best headway or speed towards the princess robots. The worker robot that gets there first obviously has got a better chance of delivering its genetic material or genetic information. So princess robots prefer worker robots that can make a swift movement with their extender arms. Thus also have a good fighting, is also good at fighting off rivals. So the princess robot will observe the worker robots and actually have a preference for those ones which are very agile with their extender arms and can fight off the rivals. And that just comes back into that quality check, because we do understand that if the extender arm is working efficiently and effectively, we know that a lot of other design aspects are also working well. So there's a graphic of Planet X, and this is now on in the dry season. And to the left we can see the worker robot there with the little wheels and the propeller, and on top it's got the extender arm and the little designed SD card where all the design info is stored on. And it's going to try and approach the princess robot, which is more or less in the middle of the graphic, and it'll try and insert the SD card into the SD card slot as indicated there. Of course, on the way to the princess robot, the other worker robots in the area will fight. They will fight each other off with the extender arms, and the princess robot will also take a careful look at which of the worker robots are most agile and most impressive with the fighting off the other robots with the extender arm. The moment the princess robot has actually received the design info from the worker robot, it will approach the queen robot and try and insert the printing material, the design material, onto the SD card info reader on the queen robot, which will use that to do a 3D print of a new worker robot. And we see there to the right we have a worker graveyard. So that's where the worker robots go to die, so to speak. They are reprocessed and become raw materials for the 3D printer. And this is just a mind experiment. It's just to make a point. And let's take a look at what happens in the wet season on Planet X. In the wet season, we now see there's some flooding. Suddenly the worker robots are floating around. Their wheels are not so important anymore. The little propeller is now important. So those worker robots with the fastest propeller speed will have a better chance of reaching the princess robots. Again, they will try and fight each other off with the extender arm to get the design info to the princess robot. And again, the princess robot will ascertain which of the worker robots is favored because of the agility and the dexterity of their extender arm. Once the princess robot has received the information in the SD card slot, it will again pass it on to the queen robot, which will do the 3D printing. And in this way, the worker robot that will be generated or printed by the queen robot will always have the most best adapted design info. So for instance, a worker robot that has got a high wheel speed will not really find its way to the princess robot in the wet season. Only the ones with the propellers, and in fact the ones with the fast moving propellers, will have a best chance to get to the princess robot. So ultimately that is the design info that will be passed on to the next generation. And when the dry season comes again, the propeller will be of less use, less advantage, and the robots on the dry land, it will be the ones with the best wheel speed. And the robots that will be printed by the 3D printer, the queen robot, will then be the ones that have wheels as part of their sort of design. And so we as the environment changes, the system will produce the most best adapted worker robots And that's just to make the point. There are many different options. We can have many different robots, sexes of robot, like we have here, basically 3 sexes, and all to serve the purpose of ensuring that adaptation is possible where the environment is going to change. So just to run quickly through the Planet X scenario again. So we said in the dry periods, the worker robots with high wheel speeds will get to the princess robots first, and will have to impress the princess robots with swift motions of their extender arms to be able to have a go with the extender arms to insert the SD card. In this way, robots with fast propellers and swift tall extender arms will have the best chance of passing the design blueprint data to the princess robots in the rainy season. Their blueprints will enforce the above traits. In the dry season, workers with fast wheels and swift tall extender arms will have the best chance of passing the design blueprint data to the princess robots. Their blueprints will enforce the above traits in that instance. We can make the queen have her own preferences. So the queen could look at the princess robots and maybe give preference to the tallest princess robot, or do some other quality check before accepting design info from a princess robot. So in conclusion, we see that the human model is just one of many that is possible when using the Xzistor concept brain model. Xzistor ecosystems aimed at survival can be developed that reside on distant planets, asteroids, deep ocean trenches, on space stations, mobile phone networks, even minute systems inside the human body, or on supercomputers, laptop apps. Think of the Sims game, computer game, or cyberspace, all areas where we can roll out the Xzistor concept brain model and have this effect, create these worlds that we've just looked at. So we can imagine the subjective experiences of these robots. If they have the same mental design as the human, and that is what the Xzistor concept brain model offers us, they might develop endearing courtships, societal and moral rules. They might have their own type of wedding ceremonies. Sex symbols can evolve, within the culture of those robots, and it could be any of the 3 sexes, all of the 3 sexes, and it can go as far as society developing divorce laws for all these different robots. So literally anything is possible. If we drop the innovation algorithm in, it is just a matter of time. It's interesting to note that the aggression and anger functionality that we've been talking about could reside in the human brain, in a piece of brain tissue no larger than this. And some people will reason that we should include the frontal cortex and the short-term and long-term memory. But ultimately, the anger and aggression functionality could be generated in the neural networks of a simple piece of brain tissue this size, creating not only the anger and aggression states, but specifically the dangerous sort of euphoric state associated with victory, and the pleasure derived from inflicting injury. Having now looked at the biology of the aggression algorithm, let's take a look at some final thoughts and conclusions. Key, I think, is we see that the Xzistor concept brain model is fully able to explain how the aggression algorithm is integrated into the brain. I think we've seen that the main purpose of the aggression algorithm is to ensure the survival traits in offspring. And we've seen when this algorithm is combined with the innovation algorithm, it could lead to a dangerous evolution of increasingly sophisticated weapons. There are some interesting parallels with sexual arousal, which I just want to mention, and it might sound unlikely, but if we strip away the sort of social and subjective contexts from these two algorithms, and we look at the pure mathematics which underpin these, there's an interesting parallel between the aggression algorithm and the sexual arousal algorithm, and I think what stands out is the fact that both of these algorithms rely on a set of actions or behaviors to actually generate the tension, which is the negative state, which could ultimately lead to the release. So what do I mean by that? I think we'll find when two parties are involved in a sexual arousal act, it is not merely a matter of coming face to face and engaging in a sexual act, but it is normally a gradual process of verbal and physical contact, which slowly leads to this aroused state, which will ultimately lead to the sexual release and the release of tension, which is then equates to the pleasurable or the euphoric state. Similarly, if we look at the mathematics of the aggression algorithm, we have exactly the same sort of basic components, where you would hardly ever find two parties engaged in a conflict to be straight from the outset engaged in a physical fight. It normally involves a sort of one can almost say an arousal state, where there's some verbal exchanges, some stances, some frustrations that build up, some conflicts, maybe a shouting match, eventually some physical contact, and maybe some further accusations or cursing, which will get the persons into such a aroused state that they would actually lose their temper, so to speak. And we've heard people talk about, I flipped my lid, or I just saw red. And it's almost the same as the sexual state, where you reach a point of inevitability and cannot control your behavior. And then that intense release from tension afterwards, equating to basically pleasurable, if not an euphoric state. So when we strip away the subjective and the social sort of context from these two algorithms, they are mathematically very much the same. And I think it could be an interesting study to see in the brain how closely these algorithms live together. Even geographically in the brain, because of the sort of notable sort of behaviors we've seen and read in the news about violence associated with sexual acts and misdemeanors, and the whole age of being aware of sexual assault, and then just the fact that these two algorithms are so very, very closely associated with each other. It could be very interesting to do a study on whether they are linked in some way, or what the effects of that could be. Very, very important, I think, in this demo video is the conclusion that the aggression algorithm can be removed from robot brains. So it could be removed in its entirety from a robot brain. So you're looking at a future without aggressive robots. Let's explore that a little bit more. For autonomous robots to be protective of humans in future, we will have to do exactly that. We will have to remove the aggression algorithm in its entirety from the robot brain. And the big advantage of the Xzistor concept brain model is the algorithm is so clearly defined that it stands out like a sore thumb. So it's very easy to look at a code for a brain model and identify where the aggression algorithm is located, and whether it's been removed in its entirety. This will not necessarily ensure a future with robots protective of humans. As we've said before, a robot could in cold contemplation still act aggressively against a human. There will be no emotion, there will be no pleasure or euphoria, but it could be just a logical step to remove a human when it's some form of frustration, blocking a food source, blocking some goal, leading to some frustration. So we need something more, and what we need to do is to build in an instinctive protection and nurturing drive into the robot, and basically almost mimic the nurturing and protective sort of behaviors we see a mother would have towards a child. We can make this overriding so that it overrides all other behaviors, and it's certainly quite easy. So just like we could design Troopy to instantly dislike the color white and get aggressive towards the color white, we can just build another algorithm which does the opposite, where a certain color, some physical traits or aspects will evoke a sense of protection or nurturing in the robot. And this we could do that robots act in a very supportive and safe way towards humans. We could also add audio commands that stop reverse robot actions. We've spoken about that, and we can also have the physical button on the back of the robot to override all other behaviors. This could even be a standalone hardwired analog piece of equipment on the robot, which is not embedded in the software and will completely override the actions. And when the robot is given the verbal command, it will stop or reverse its actions, and in that way sort of ensure a safety for humans. I think it's important that going forward, we do not engage in developing autonomous combatant robots. I think we've had our fun on this planet. We've got thousands of years of conflict behind us. I think it's really time to grow up and resort to diplomatic ways to solve strife. And there's really no more excuses to keep on developing weapons and keep on developing autonomous combatant robots. And for that we will need international legislation. So it's very simple. There's no need for anybody to develop an autonomous combatant robot. If they do engage in this design process and they are found guilty, they'll be subjected to international law. This is based on our understanding of aggression. It should be something of the past now. It is not needed in our world anymore, and we should really start to act like grown-ups and move on, especially as we step into the robot age. Just a final mention there, the Xzistor concept is run on the basis of an ethical design and deployment code, and this is something in the future that we will keep on developing, and it'll speak to some of these aspects just mentioned, to ensure there's actually a physical code which ensures, as robots are designed, that there are no aggression built into robots. There's always an instinctive protection towards humans, and it's almost like the Asimov's rules coming into play, but in this case it is all based on the mathematics of this model, and it is very, very much controllable and verifiable. And I think on that note, I think we can conclude. I think again, with this, I see a future with robots protective of humans, and whereas many people are concerned about the future of robots and the effect on humans, I think if we go along this design route and see what else we can learn from the Xzistor concept brain model, it will ensure that we proceed on a safe journey and a future alongside robots. This is Enno signing off from the Xzistor Lab. Thank you for watching.